Bill Green, crowd favorite here. He had a entry into real estate with a condo in Colorado that became more of a burden than an asset. It wasn't a nightmare property, but it gradually turned into a poor investment for a couple of reasons. There was a hidden cost drain, right? It came with a $500 a month HOA, which slowly eroded his equity over time, even as the market grew and high monthly expenses, like stayed there. He had selling struggles. That unattractive HOA made it harder for him to sell it. And then at a certain point, even though he had invested in a high ticket education program, he just kind of felt stuck on what to do with it. How likely is this?
Likely it's depending on what you got into. Some people got into the property when the HOA was high and it made sense for a primary, but it doesn't make sense for an investment purpose. So when you're living in it, a lot of those numbers can make sense. Sometimes your HOAs are paying for parking spots that would otherwise be expensive, for lawn care that you'd pay for some of the maintenance, roofing, shared walls. And when you're living in it, it makes sense. But when you're not, it might not offset your numbers the same way. Anything 400, 500, I would place that in the high HOA category. But it's not that it's unjustifiable. It just normally does not make sense for investments when you're looking to make money off of it.
Tell me about kind of like the right way to look at HOAs when you're thinking about a rental property.
Yeah, so like we have a handful of properties that are in HOAs. It's not primarily in a lot of our products, but we're going to have a handful of townhomes where it makes sense because the HOA is really just minimal, taking care of your lawn maintenance, kind of your shared lawn, your common areas, roofs, and shared walls. And when we are making those buying decisions as a turnkey provider, we're doing the reverse engineering of the math. So we're going in and saying, okay, what is kind of your break even here for your HOA, taxes, mortgage, property taxes, mortgage, everything that's going to go into that, kind of putting those all into your expenses. And then what can you rent it for? What can you sell it for? And you play with all of the numbers. And it's rare in our world that we see that number really jump to something that we didn't expect. But I think back to that main thing is if it ever does something that you didn't expect, what's the plan to get it back into place? And that's where I would really lean into, again, your team. And if you don't have a team, that's going to make it really tough. But knowing that, okay, hey, team, these numbers, this HOA was $100 when I bought it, and now it's $300. What are we going to do? The answer is not jacking up the rent because that's market controlled. That's not your property management company controlled. So that's not going to be the answers. It's okay, let's look at all of your income and all of your expenses and see where we can really play with it and say maybe it's us reshopping insurance. That's a huge opportunity for people in Florida right now. Where can I reshop that and play with the rates? Where can I do this? And then, okay, where can we make the most of what the HOA also has to offer and kind of just really play with the numbers there?
That's great advice for people that are in an HOA without a lot of control over the HOA.
Yeah.
I know that Lee, because he's the MVP, he's saying he knows of at least one situation where JWB is involved in the HOA. And I know that we've talked on the show about how like it's very likely that if you're in a property with an HOA with JWB, there's likely a critical mass of units that are owned by JWB and they'll have somebody on the board of an HOA. And therefore the HOA is making investor-friendly decisions. You want to tell me a little bit about those?
Yeah, also that I think that can kind of go into two part because we can be on a board and that does not mean we get final say in all decisions, but we can have a hefty influence in some. But I think, yeah, a good point is how can we make sure that an HOA is what it in my head should have been designed to be. It is a homeowners association. So instead of someone else coming in and telling you what to do, it is making decisions for the homeowners who it will benefit them the most. And so while it is spending dollars, it is to fix this thing that there's an issue that will then raise your home value. And that's kind of the box that I'm going to look to check is this making it a better experience for the renter so that you can justify rents that make sense with a higher valued property? Or is this going to make an improvement that will allow me to sell this at a higher rate when the time is to sell?
Yeah. So I know that we've talked about it. Like, I know Greg's brought up examples like people thinking of like gates versus pools versus other kinds of things. Do you have any kind of like anecdotes of like what is generally a good thing for an HOA to invest in that actually raises values versus stuff that people do just because the neighbor has it or something like that?
Yeah, I think roofs is a big one that I see. So sometimes, especially, I'm thinking townhomes just because that's where we really play in this category.
Mhm.
But that's a big one is like when it's time for roofs, normally we like to do them and HOAs like to do them in big chunks at a time. So like I'm going to do these 12 on this street.
Mhm.
And then when those are complete, then I'm going to do the 12 on the next street. And while that's going to cost money, that's huge. And it's not nearly as much money as it would cost for you to just replace your own roof on your own. So it does save you money at the end of the day and add a lot of value.
Got it. Makes sense. Okay. So then Billy Green, apart from coming on the show and getting one of the coolest nicknames around, one of the things he realized was, I mean, he was into this community that cares thing, obviously. That's an ongoing thing. He really wanted a team that could do it all, right? Including preferred lenders, closing support, long-term strategy and guidance. He grew immense confidence in the Jacksonville market, something that we've talked about with the Leslie situation.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, I know that he took advantage of like the execution level on the 1031 and a couple of like incentives that were happening at the time. And that's what made him kind of like overcome that initial thing.
Boom.
So there you go.